Judy and I met in September of 1964 in English class. And of course I was in the back of the class with all the football players, and she was in the front of the class making an A and I made a C. So we didn't really talk, but we had a lot of focal dialogue. And I didn't meet her actually until the summer of '65, when she was at Mass at St. Anthony's, and I met her and introduced myself, and I says, I think I know you from ASU, and she says, yes, my family just moved down here. So I was born and raised in Casa Grande, so I'm a Casa Grande guy, and graduated from high school there. Mom and Dad were raised in Casa Grande, and that's where our story starts.
Well, my story starts, the Andersons. Growing up, we moved around a lot. I was born in California, I'm the oldest. My brother Ron was born in Illinois. My sister Karen was born next in Illinois. But then the youngest, my brother Dan, was born in Detroit. We moved to Dallas, and finally moved out, to Arizona. But in 1950, my dad contracted polio. And so he was on crutches and braces and eventually in a wheelchair. But that's why he loved coming out here to Arizona, because no snow and ice to have to deal with. So I started at ASU in 1964, and I majored in home economics, and I worked as a student assistant in one of the residence halls, and Marty majored in management, and he worked down in Casa Grande with the Hexcel. They made aluminum honeycomb pads that were used for landing in Vietnam.
So as we dated during the 60s, 65 through 68, we decided to get married in September of 1968. So I was drafted and started my Army tour in February of 1969. So Judy was pregnant with AJ, and we split ways. I went to Fort Bliss, Texas, Fort Ord, California, and then I went to Vietnam for 123 days. I want to welcome Ray Alcantara, who's in the audience today, and thank him for coming and supporting us. We were buddies in Vietnam. After the Vietnam tour, I spent a year with Judy and AJ at that time at Fort Riley, Kansas, and then I spent some time in Germany.
One of the things that was the end of his time in Vietnam was somebody tripped a wire, and he was injured, and I got a telegram, and at that time I didn't realize that the Western Union telegrams had kind of a black border. So I'm living with my parents, and the doorbell rings, and somebody hands me this telegram, and I close the door, and I'll never forget steadying myself, leaning back against the door, opening this telegram. What was it going to say? And then it said he just broke his finger, but he had more injury than that. But if you're in the infantry and you can't shoot your gun, he was able to come home. He did spend a couple of weeks at a hospital in Japan, and then I was sent back to the U.S. But as he was saying, our sons were born, Martin Jr. in Casa Grande while he was in Vietnam, and then John was born in Fort Riley, Kansas, and then we moved back here, and he was out of the service, so we had a home in Scottsdale, and we were there for like 11 years. And then during that time, he started Sun Eagle Corporation in 1978, and I worked in some different social service. That was my area of interest, and so Association of Arizona Food Banks and American Cancer Society.
When I got back from Vietnam, Judy and I were in Casa Grande for about 15 days, and then we moved to Scottsdale. And so in 1971, we bought a house in Scottsdale, and the boys went to OLPH, and then they went to Brophy. One went to Loyola, and the other guy went to ASU. So during that time, 1971 through 77, we had a consulting firm that, where we helped minority contractors called Arizona Contractor Service Center. Quite a dynamic company, and we had a grant with the federal government. We were very blessed. So we lost our grant in 1978 and started Sun Eagle Corporation. Sun Eagle Corporation is the general contracting company, and we've been, again, blessed. And both Marty and John were a part of this company, and very proud of them. We've been in business now 41 years. So we've built almost somewhere between 700 and 800 buildings, and somewhere about $900 to $1 billion in work. So very proud of what we're doing with them. Additionally, in 2002, Judy and I went to Ireland, and so somewhere along the line on the Alvarez side, Judy and I worked together to be the family historians. So in 1967, she and I started doing a family history. So we look tonight as a family history, as an extension of all the studying that we've done on the Alvarez family. So want to thank everybody for coming, and want to thank Judy for being such a great partner and supporting us in our great family. But thank you folks for coming, and we'll chat a little later.
Ross and I met in 1967, spring of 1967. He had a friend that had a habit of, on weekends, he would call the dormitory. In those days, ASU, I was attending ASU when Ross was already out of school working. And this friend of his had a tendency to call girls from the directory. In those days, ASU produced a directory with names and phone numbers of all the students. And he happened to call my room late one evening, and we talked for a while, and he told me he had this good friend, Ross. And so he was in architecture school, and I happened to work in the cafeteria, and I knew a couple of guys that were architecture students, and they were friends of Ross's and Roy's. So I talked to them about this guy. Do they know anything about these two guys? And they said, oh yeah, they're good guys, and Ross is a really nice guy. So a couple of days later, Ross called me and asked me out, and we started dating, and we've been together ever since. We got married in November 30th, 1968 at Newman Center in Tempe. Both of my brothers were in the service at the time, so neither one of them were able to attend our wedding, but we did have a very nice wedding at, like I said, at the Newman Center, and then we had a little reception at a local hotel. Both of Ross's brothers were at the wedding. They were ushers for us, and I'm trying to remember who else the usher was. His middle brother, Scott, was the best man, and then Brett helped push my dad down the aisle.
Well, as my dad would say, she was cute as a bug's ear.
Yes, he did.
And we had a great time dating, and got to know each other, and probably the #1 characteristic of Karen that got me excited was that she was feisty.
Yes.
And I'm afraid she's gotten even more feisty over the 50 years, but we get along. We're doing great.
Like I said, we got married November 30th in 1968. 2 years later, 3 years later, our first daughter, Leisha, was born. She was born May 9th, 1971. And then almost 3 years later, Shonda was born. Shonda Marie was born February 11th, 1974. And we've lived in Scottsdale basically all our married life. We lived in Tempe for a few months and then moved to Scottsdale early in our marriage and have been there ever since. Both of our daughters graduated from ASU. I should start off saying Ross also graduated from ASU when Leisha was about a year old. And Both of our daughters graduated from ASU, Leisha in chemistry and Shonda with a degree in marketing. Both our daughters are married. Leisha got married in 2001 and Shonda got married in 1999. They both still live in the Phoenix area. We also are blessed with 4 grandchildren. So we have had a wonderful life. Ross has always been a great father and good with our kids and wonderful with the grandchildren. We spend lots of time together, going on vacations together.
The grandchildren are great. We're very fortunate that we have the opportunity to be close to them and spend a lot of time with them.
And Ross and I, now that our children are grown, we have lots of time to travel when we're not doing things with the grandchildren. But it's been a wonderful, happy life.
It's been a great 50 years.
Our family has a great tradition of celebrating golden wedding anniversaries. It started back a long time ago with our great-great-grandfather.
And that was Dan Doyle, and he was born in Ireland and came over here to the U.S. And his wife was born in Ireland, came over here to the U.S. where they met Mary Kerwin Doyle, and they had a beautiful, big celebration. The farmers and people that came in Illinois to their farmhouse in 1908.
And their son, Lawrence, married Mary Dwyer, and actually his brother, Dan Doyle, married Lizzie Dwyer Doyle. 2 brothers married 2 sisters, and it started another tradition in our family. We have 2 sisters that married 2 brothers. The Sedlak sisters, Mary and Joanne, married Bill and Stephen Parsons. And then LF Lawrence, our great-grandfather, and Mary Dwyer Doyle celebrated their golden wedding anniversary.
And then his son was a Dan. You run into that a lot in families where the names keep repeating, but our grandfather was Dan Doyle, and he married Catherine Sullivan, and they were able to celebrate their golden wedding.
And then our parents celebrated their golden wedding anniversary in Casa Grande in 1994.
On Marty's side of the family, he had his older sister and husband, Gloria and Jim Nemeth, were able to celebrate their golden wedding anniversary back in 2012. So and then a cousin, just a year ago, celebrated Phyllis Timko and her husband Rich, celebrated their golden wedding anniversary.
Well, and Uncle Larry and Aunt Eloise celebrated their golden wedding anniversary. That's my mother's brother and his wife. And then also Aunt Pat and Uncle Jim Sedlak, Patricia Doyle Sedlak and Jim Sedlak, celebrated their 50th, and not only their 50th, but they made it to 60 years. So it's been a long tradition. And so we would like to thank you all for joining us in this to help celebrate this, our extension of that tradition.
Yes, it's a very special occasion, obviously, for us, but having all of you here and sharing with it really makes it extra special. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.